you got to know what a win is, right? When I wake up in the morning, my to-do list is 8 items long every day. I do 8 things every day. Why? And two of them are really hard writing tasks, and they go all the way, down to the smallest ones. But when I've done 8 things, that's a win. I get to shut it down, right? Hemingway said there were 2 rules in writing. He said you have to quit when you're most excited, which I fervently believe, and I think this, works for all executives. Stop when you're most excited, because that way it's not as hard to come back to in the morning. You're fired up. You've won the motivation. And there's actually, there's a neurobiological reason for it too. When we're most excited, we've got a lot of kind of norepinephrine and dopamine in our system. Those chemicals don't last very long. Mm-hmm. So they're not going to last very long anyways. So by the time you've noticed it, you can walk away. The second thing Hemingway said is, when I'm done working, I'm done working. I put it down.
Right.
And you have to, because you've got a pattern recognition system for our brain. It's going to solve creative problems for you. But it can only do it if you turn the problem over from the conscious mind to the adaptive unconscious, right? You can't do it in the conscious mind, and you've got to, here's, by the way, where non-ordinary states really come in handy, right? Because they do that switch for you. But
it's interesting when we talk about non-ordinary states. You said, we might think of psychedelics, we might think of meditation, we might think of those kinds of things. But one of the things that I remind people of is one of those states. It is a state where you are not cognitively working. And they go, what do you mean? I say, listen, I've had some of my most brilliant moments when I'm having a shit. I've had some of my most brilliant moments when I'm having a shower. I've had some of my most brilliant moments when I'm doing the dishes, where I'm not consciously, cognitively trying to process, and where I'm actually drifting and letting myself drift in some way that I'm actually, so somebody said to me, well, can you do that with Facebook or Twitter? And I said, as long as you don't read. You can do it as long as you don't read. And they go, what do you mean? Well, every now and then I'll go on Twitter and I'm scrolling. But I don't actually read. I'm actually noticing that I'm not actually reading, and then it'll pop because I've got this. It becomes like my background. It's this blur that allows me to drift, and I think that that's an important piece that I think we make it very difficult to do these things when in fact they're not that difficult. That you're actually naturally doing them anyway.
You're totally right, and so. What you're describing, right, is a well-established kind of psychological. First of all, flow works that way. There's a 4-part. If you want to get into flow, it's a 4-part cycle. Struggle. There's a loading phase on the front where you're loading the brain with information, right? The second phase is release. You have to take your mind off the problem. Certain things work really well. Low-grade physical activity. Showers, which you talked about, works really well. Because there's a flow trigger known as deep embodiment. And all that means is you're paying attention to multiple sensory streams at once, different input streams. Your skin is your largest organ in your body, right? So you're being rained on. It's warm rain, it feels amazing, and it detracts you. There's a release phase. You go through it, and suddenly your subconscious takes over. And if you look at the conscious mind as a problem-solving tool, very powerful, but really limited. Working memory can hold 5 to 9 items, and most of us tap out around 5, right? Adaptive unconscious, it can process an infinite number of items. Literally, like scientists can't find the end of it. It's much faster, et cetera, et cetera. So, and it's very quick. All you have to do is forget about the problem, and, boom comes the solution. And there's ways to, knowing that the brain does that, right? You have a pattern recognition system for brain. You can engineer exactly what you're talking about. There's something called the MacGyver method invented by Lee Slodoff, which is a process for driving this, right? Josh Waitzkin has a different process. I think in his podcast with Tim Ferriss, I think in his second one, he talks about taking the same kind of process and using it all day long with executives in really interesting ways. Building those, you got to learn to cultivate the silence on a certain level. And I think that's critical. Non-time is really important.
If what you've heard on Flow Research Collective Radio has been helpful, Please consider doing us a solid and leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening to this. Reviews help us connect to a wider audience so we can get these peak performance principles out to more people.